Okay, so today's Daf Yomi is Yevamos 102 Kuf Bays. We're going to start on the top of Kuf Bays Amid Aleph, the first word actually. Last two words of Kuf Aleph Amid Bays. Amar Rava Rava taught. Now we're on top of Kuf Bays Amid Aleph. Ger done es chavero devar Torah. And biblically speaking, a convert is able to judge another convert. Biblically speaking, a convert is allowed to judge another convert. And Rashi says this obviously refers to capital cases, because if it's a monetary cases, then a convert can even judge the rest of Israel. As it states, Hakol Ksherim Ladun. Everybody can, in the Mishnah and Sanhedrin, everybody's kosher to be a judge for Dinei Mamanos. And there the Gemara says, Hakol Asuya, Ma'il Asuya Ger comes to include a convert. So therefore, Rashi says this refers to a judgment of capital case. But however, Tosfos argues. Tosfos says, "Vei nira kitavti b'acholitz." Tosfos argues with that. This argues Rashi's approach. So now we go on in the Gemara. So Ger danas chaver dvar Torah says, "Som tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Hashem al kecha bo mikerav achecha tasim alecha." So that's the verse that says you shall place a king upon yourself who needs to come from amongst your brothers. Meaning to say, Alecha, Melech Alecha hu debaina. We need somebody who is a king from upon you. That's what we require. Alecha hu debaina. We require the king to be from upon you. So we see from here, and it needs to be Mikera Vachecha. The one who's going to be a king upon you needs to come from amongst your brother. A vulgar, but a convert, even though he's not allowed to, even though he's not allowed to judge a person who's born Jewish in Dinei Nefashos, he can judge done as Chavero Ger. He's able to judge his fellow convert. Remember, he said, Imo Yisrael, done Afil Yisrael. And if his mother was born Jewish, then he can even judge another Jew. Also, the pashtus of this Gemara is that if there's a person whose mother was Jewish and his father was not, he could be the king of Israel. Because it says with respect to Chalitza, Achia other the Imo Yisrael, to be a judge in a Chalitza case, there you need somebody to have both their father and their mother Jewish. As it states, V'nikra Shemo b'Yisrael. So we see V'nikra Shemo b'Yisrael, meaning to say that in order to do that, we need to have somebody whose father and mother is Jewish. Rashi says, Mash Mashiach Israel Mikol Tzedadim. Needs to be Israel on all sides. Amar Rav Kan Amar Rav Imiyavo Elio. Let's say Elijah the prophet will come and tell us the halacha. Yomer, and the Rambam cites this Gemara as proof that even if Elijah comes, we don't overturn the majority, because the prophet's power is limited. So he says, if Elijah will come and say to you, Choltzim b'minal, that you're allowed to do chalitza with a minal. Minal is a soft shoe. And so meaning to say, the implication is you weren't doing it with a soft shoe. Shomanlo, you can listen to Elijah the prophet. But if he tells you, Ein Choltzim is sandal, but if he says, you know what? You're not allowed to do chalitza with this sandal, which is this shoe with this hard sole. Ein Shomanlo, we don't listen to him. Shekvar nago am b'sandal. The people already had the practice of doing it with a sandal. So even if Elijah comes and tells us we can't do it, we don't listen to him. Whereas Rav Yosef says, so that was a tradition that Rabbi had in the name of Rav. Rav Yosef says, if he tells you not to do the chalitza with the minol, you listen to him, because presumably you've been doing it all along with the minol. So now he tells you to stop, you stop. But if he tells you ain't choltzim b'sandal, but if he tells you not to do it with the sandal, this hard shoe, ain't shalom shekfar nago am b'sandal. You don't listen to him because the people already have that practice. So my benayo, minal l'chatchila. The difference between them is whether now you can do it with a minal, because according to Rabbi, you can. According to Rav Yosef, that he says, according to Rabbi, you can do it with the minal, because according to Rav Yosef, you can do it with the minnow. That's what you're doing now. But according to Rabbah, only if Eliyahu another comes and tells you can do it, can you do it? Gemara says, and according to the position, i.e., according to Rav Yosef, who says you can do it even initially. But our Mishnah says that if you do the chalitza with this shoe, it's kosher, which implies it implies the only ex post facto is a kosher. Gemara says no. This is the case, even with chatchila, you can do it with the minnow. But so why does it use an expression of b'di'evet with respect to the chalitza? Gemara says, because the next clause in the Mishnah wants to say if you did it with a sock, it's disqualified, which would imply that afilu di'evet, even b'di'evet, even after the fact, the sock is no good. So therefore, tani nami reisha di'evet. So therefore, it also says in the first clause, a language, an expression of b'di'evet. The Mishnah explains, and so we saw that Rav Yosef said that min al chatchila is you can do the soft shoe even initially, and Rabbah says not initially. You need Eliyahu Navi to tell you that you can do it, but this itself is a dispute. Tonight, Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Yossi pamachas halachti l'nitzivin. I once went to Nitzivin and Matzasi Zakin Echad there. I found an elder and Amartilo Kuma Tabaki Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira. I said, "Are you an expert in the teachings of Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira?" And he said to me, "He is. I'm Hain Val Shulchan Tadir." And he's always sitting at my table. And I said to him, "Kum Raisa Shachalotz B'Yevama." He said, "I said to him, did you ever see a chalitza with his Yevama? Did you ever see a chalitza in front of him?" I'm Cain Raisi Shachalotz Harvei Pamim. I saw that he did this chalitza many times, and I said, "B'minol or b'sandal?" Well, did he do this chalitza with a minol? Did he do it with a soft shoe, or with a sandal? Amarli v'chicholtzim b'minol. So he said to me, "Do you do chalitza with this minol? You don't do the chalitza with the shoe, with the soft shoe, only with the hard shoe." Amar Martilo. So I said to him, so that's the case. Why did he say it's kosher? And Rabbi Yaakov Omer Mishmo. Rabbi Yaakov said you do it even initially. So we see it's a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Rabbi Meir seems to say, as when Rabbi Yossi came to Nitzivin, Rabbi Meir said. Rabbi Yossi said, Rabbi Meir says you do it with a minnow only b'di'evet, but Rabbi Yaakov says even chatchila. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yaakov says you can do it even initially. My time, and what's the reasoning? So the one who says you can do it with this soft shoe even initially, what's the reasoning that you can do it? Because the reasoning is, if you want to say, because the panta, which is a leather that's on top of the leather, Rash says gav manal, the back of the shoe, which is basically it's on top of the foot, me'al v'arkasa, and then the strings me'al the me'al, and the strings are on top of. So what's the reasoning why you're, according to Rabbi Meir, that you're not supposed to use this shoe? Is it because the panta, the leather, is on top of the shoe, like the back of the shoe is on top of the foot, and the arkasa, in the strings are the me'al me'al. The strings are on top of the shoe. Torah amar me'al v'lo me'al me'al, and the Torah says you have to remove the shoe me'al raglo, from his foot, but not from on top of what's on top of its foot. So that's why Rabbi Meir is saying you shouldn't use this minnow, or if that's the case, afil devi abin namilo. So gzer mishum minnow merufat. So even if that's the case, you shouldn't even do it with a b'di'evet, because you might come to use a minnow merufat. What's a shoe that's merufat? What's merufat? Rashi says that it's cracked above. Because since it's cracked, since it's soft, it's going to be cracked, and then you might be removing something that's on top of the shoe. And so if that's the case, but or it's a sandal won't be cracked because it's hard. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, I feel the Yavin Namilo, even b'di'evet it shouldn't. Excuse me. Inami mishim or is what? So is one concern because it's a crack shoe, or inami mishim chatzi mino, or maybe because it's just a half a shoe, and so therefore, what's going to happen is you might come to since it might get cracked, and you might come to do it, and you might then come to do chalitza with half a shoe. If only half of the shoe is there and it's soft, you might be able to wear it even though it's half a shoe, and that would not be acceptable. So therefore, it's only the evet. So that's why the position of Rabbi Meir. So I'm a Rabbi Rav the Chamisi Chavivi. So Rav says, if I didn't see my beloved uncle Rav Chia the Cholotz Besanel the Islay Shinsin, that I saw that he did chalitza with a shoe that has shinsin. Rashi says these are like strings. If I didn't see him do it with a shoe that has strings, then I would have only done the chalitza with a shepherd shoe, with the shoe of a shepherd, because it fits very snugly. Didan and our shoes that we use, afagav isbei chumarta, even though they have these knots around them so that they don't fall off the foot, nevertheless, Katrina Bay Misna, even though they have knots, nevertheless, we tie another strap around them. So that should be when you remove it, you're going to remove the straps from on top of the foot, so it'll be a very good chalitza. So it's really hard to understand without seeing exactly how they wore their shoes back then, exactly what their shoes looked like. But obviously what they're saying is it needs to fit well, and you have to be removing the whole shoe, not the torn shoe, and not on top of the shoe. Okay, so now Amar Rav Yehuda Marav Hataras Yevamo Ashok B'Shmitas Rova HaEkev. So he says the woman is going to be allowed to marry somebody, i.e. it's a val chalitza, when you remove the majority of the akev, meaning to say the majority of the bottom of the shoe, and even though you don't remove the entire shoe from the foot. So the Gemara says, but that's a problem. We have a contradiction. May say hutra retzuas min al usandal osha shamat rova regel chalitza psula. We have a brayz which says if you remove the straps of a shoe or of the sandal, or if you remove the majority of the foot from the shoe, remove the majority of the shoe from the foot, or the majority of the foot from the shoe, chalitza psula, it's disqualified. What's the reason? Taima de shamad hu. The reasoning why it's disqualified is because he's the one who removed it. But Hasham Tahi, but if she did the removal, chalitza sakshera, it'll be valid, which means rova regel in, rova ekev low. So doesn't that imply that if you remove the majority of the foot, it's okay, but when you just do the majority of the ekev, then it's not going to be acceptable. You need the majority of the foot, not the majority of the akev. So the says low. Hainu rova regel, hainu rova akev. They're actually the exact same thing. And my karwe rova regel, the kua chayla the karwe. What's the reasoning why the rova regel is also called the rova akev? Because since the whole foot alea dachet. So since the whole foot is resting on the akev, the kiven the maikarle rover, I got the kua chayla the kara alea dachas. Since the whole foot is resting on the sole, therefore we call the rova akev the same thing as the rova regel, and it's essentially the same thing. So this idea is Messiah Rabbi Yanai, the idea that you need the Yevama to remove the strings, the laces, and to remove the shoe, it fits with what Rabbi Yanai said. Amar Rabbi Yanai taught, Bein shehitirhu, v'sham tahi, bein shetirahi, v'sham atu, chalitzas psula, whether she untied it and he removed it, or he untied it, and she removed it, it's disqualified. She needs to untie the laces, and she needs to remove the shoe. Let's say she tore the shoe off, or let's say she burnt the shoe off. Is that going to be acceptable? Do we need her to uncover the foot? And that's what was done. Or maybe we need her to remove the shoe in that manner, and you haven't done that. So Gemara says, Teku. It's unresolved. Let's say you have two shoes, one's on top of the other. Is that going to be acceptable? Gemara says, wait, let's even first understand this question. Do you want to say, let's say you want to say that she moved the top shoe and the bottom shoe is still there. That's obviously no good, because it says you need to remove the top one and not the top one that's on top of the top one. So that's not going to be acceptable. So Gemara says, no, let's so what happened is you tore the top one and you snuck out the bottom one through the hole of the top one. That's going to be the question. You did remove the bottom shoe. Or maybe you need to reveal the foot. You have not revealed the foot here. So maybe it's not acceptable. Gemara says, this is such a far-fetched scenario. Can you really have such a far-fetched scenario? So, Gemara answers, it is possible. The Rabbanan saw Rabbi Yehuda, they used to walk outside into the marketplace with 5 pairs of felt shoes, one on top of the other. And so, yeah, there are some people who wore it. So therefore, we really do have indeed this question. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Yevamos she'egdila beina achin. Let's say there's a woman who was a Yevama, she was waiting for Yibam, and she grew up amongst her brothers-in-law. She's allowed to marry one of them, do Yibam with them. We don't have to be concerned. We don't have to be concerned that accidentally or unintentionally she removed one of their shoes. So the Gemara says, Taima, the implication of this statement of Rav is that the reason why she can marry her brother, do Yibam, is because we didn't actually see her removing a shoe. But if we had seen it, it would have been a problem. But how is that okay? She didn't have intent to do chalitza. Didn't we learn in the Brayso, ben shen eskavin hu, bon eskavin nahi, ben shen eskavin nahi, bon eskavin hu, chalitza sapsua, achi eskavin hu shneim ke'echad. They both need intent. Without them both having intent, it's not acceptable. The Gemara says, Tanya, no, we have a Brayso, ben shen eskavin hu, bon eskavin nahi, ben shen. Okay, I just read that. So the Gemara says, Hachakamar. So now this is what I mean. Afagav de chazinan, it means to say that Rav is saying, even though we saw her remove her shoe, ein chosheshin, we don't have to be concerned. Shema kivna, we don't have to be concerned that really maybe she had intent. So you don't have to be concerned about that. The Ikadari, alternatively, some of an alternative version, time of the little chazinan. What's the reason why she can marry one of the brothers? Because we didn't see her remove a shoe. Chazinan. But if we had seen her remove a shoe, we actually would be concerned about it. In the katana by kavana, and that which we learned that you require kavana, that you require intent for it to be a valid chalitza. Yeah, that's hani mili l'shtaruye alma. That's to allow her to remarry, to go out into the market and marry. But to her own brothers, she's disqualified to marry her husband's brothers. Even if we don't know about the intent, she'd be disqualified on its own. So, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav, sandal atafur bepishtin in choltzim. Let's say you have the sandal, but it was sewn up with non-leather laces. It was sewn up with flax laces in choltzim. You can't use it for a chalitza because the verse says v'anale. Va'an, verse says, Va'an alech tachash, and I will clothe you in shoes that are made out of tachash, which implies that the whole shoe has to be made out of this animal material, which is called the tachash. We know from the Mishkan that the tachash was this type of animal. We don't know exactly what type of animal. And so therefore, it's not going to be okay to use laces that are coming from non-animal material for chalitza. Maybe it means you have to specifically use the tachash. That'll be hard. We're not sure what it is anyway. So the Gemara says, no, now, riba. It says the word now twice. It says beit chalutza now, and it says also the chalutza now me'al raglo. So it means you can use any type of shoe. Inal now riba, feel call milinami. Maybe any type of shoe. No, the Gemara says, tachash my honey. Well, why does it say tachash? It needs to be a leather shoe. But other than that, it doesn't need to specifically be tachash animal. It could be any animal. Who shall or utrisio sub shall say or mahu. So let's say the straps are made out of goat hair, but the shoe itself is made out of leather. So Amar Milo Karina Bevanalech Tachash. So that's an animal. So it's okay. It's okay. That's okay. So the verse says Bevanalech Tachash comes to include that. When says Kula shall say or Nami. So maybe make the whole shoe out of goat hair. The Gemara says, well, that's not a shoe. Ahu karaka mikri. That's called a karaka. It's not called a minnow. So that's not going to be okay. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Kahana Shmuel, Mimai Dahai v'cholta nalo me'al raglo. So now the Gemara asks the question in linguistics that Rav Kahana says to Shmuel. This is already not the first question Rav Kahana has about chalitza. So Rav Kahana says to Shmuel, how do we know that when it says that she removes the shoe from his foot, that chaltza now me'al rago? How do we know the word chalitza means mishlaf? It means to remove. How do we know that that's the case? How do we know that that's the case? Gemara says, because the reason is it says with respect to the tzaras on a house, you remove the shoes that have the affliction. So remove the stones that have the affliction. So you see, chaltza means to remove something. Maybe it doesn't mean to remove it. Maybe it means to have zrizos, meaning to say that what she's supposed to do is she's supposed to take it off the ground and put the shoe on his foot. Rashi says maybe that's all it means. Because doesn't it say in the parasha that you have to take Reuven, Gad, and half from Menashe to be the chalutzim, the vanguard, and so chalutza means the opposite, to put it on, to do that. So the Gemara says, no, even there, the vanguard means they're removed from their house and going into battle. The Gemara says, but the Gemara says, but what about the fact that it says Yechavotz ani ba'anav, meaning to say, Rashi says, that you should strengthen the poor man. And the Gemara is going to answer, this is also a removal, meaning to say, remove the money of his poverty. It means that the money of his poverty. Well, read the Gemara and then I'll go back to Rashi. Yeah, there too, with the payment of it, with the reward for being poor, he's being saved from the judgment of Gehenna. So that's what it's teaching us. Meaning to say that's Rashi says this is a shalufe. This is also means shalufe, because what are you doing? You're removing, by making him poor, you're removing him from the punishment of hell. So Gemara says, what do we do with the fact that the verse says, the angel of God camps around those who fear him, and v'chaltzim. So what does that mean? The reward of those who fear him, he's saving them, medina shel Gehenna. So there too, yechaltzim means the expression of remove. Gemara says, and what about the fact that it says va'atzmosecha yachwitz, which doesn't seem to be an expression of removal, because the verse is stating, V'nachacha Hashem tamid v'hispia b'tzach tzachos nafshecha v'atzmosecha yachwitz. So it doesn't seem to be an expression of removal in that verse. So, Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Zu me'ua shebebrachos. This is the best of the blessings. Rava Rava Zeruze Garmi. And Rava says that his rizus is what caused this. So meaning to say, we want to strengthen the bones, and so therefore, I don't know. The chalitza means to remove. Gemara says in mashmachi mashmachi. Gemara says, what? You're right. The chalitza can mean both things. It can mean actually opposite things. It can mean remove and to strengthen. We have this expression sometimes. Remember the beginning of Maseches Pesachim or Bar Basar. It can be the morning. The light can be morning, or light can be night. So sometimes it can be opposite things. So here too, the chalitza can be to remove it, it could be to strengthen. So the hacha, but in our case, if the Torah really wants to mean that it means to strengthen, it would say that she should put the shoe on his foot. So the Gemara says, no, it can't do that. Then I might have thought that it means to put it on his foot, but not on his thigh. But so therefore, so therefore it says me'al that if, let's say, his foot was amputated, all he has is the thigh, that's what you do. So the Gemara says, no, my me'al raglo. So from there we learn that it means to remove the shoe. So there was a heretic who said to Rabbi Gamliel, Ama, you Jewish people, you're a nation that God has removed himself from you. What's the proof? What's the proof that God has removed himself from you? The proof is because it states, that they're going to go with their sheep and their cattle to find God, and they won't find him because he removed himself from them. So you see, God has removed himself from you. So Amalei said, Shota. He said, you fool, miksif chalatz lahem. It doesn't say that God removed himself from Jewish people. Chalatz meyam ksiv. That God accepted chalitza from the Jewish people. And so too, we see by the Yevama that when she removes the shoe from her brother, that's exactly what happens. That she removes the shoe. So she removes the shoe, even though it uses that expression. Now we say Bampila chalitza sapsua. If you go with a sock, if you do chalitza with a sock, it's going to be disqualified. L'meimer dampila lav minahu. So we see that this ampila, the sock, is not a shoe. And we also learned Eina Torem, that the person, we have a Mishnah in Shkolm that says Eina Torem nichnas lo b'pargan chafus lo b'ampilya. You're not allowed to go in with a garment which has a hem and not with a sock or with his leather shoes, because we don't want you to hide any money in them because you're the treasurer. And of course you can't go into, when you're going to collect the tzedakah money from the temple, the shkolim, of course you can't go in with a minal or a sandal. You're not allowed to walk into the courtyard of the temple with a minal or a sandal. Mar says, is this the case? But didn't we learn in the Brisa, is it really the case that this ampilia is not a shoe, and the proof is that you're allowed to walk into the Azar with it? But we have a contradiction, because we say on Yom Kippur, respect to the prohibition of wearing shoes on Yom Kippur, we say that you're not going to walk around with a shoe, with a minnow or a sandal, or with an ampilya. So we see from here that the ampilya is a shoe, this sock-like item. So Amar Abaye, the isbei kasise mishum tanug. So Abaye says, no, the reason why you're not going to wear this ampilya is not because it's a shoe, but it's because it's giving you too much pleasure on Yom Kippur. And so therefore the concern is that it's going to give you too much pleasure. So that's the problem. Amar le Rava, so Rava says to Abaye, Mishum Tanag below minal b'yom Kippur mi'asiri. You mean to say that if you're just wearing something that feels good, but it's not a shoe, it's prohibited on Yom Kippur? Well, Rabbi Arfuna karach sudra kari v'nafik. Rabbi Arfuna used to tie like a towel or something around his foot and walk outside with it. There's no problem with having the light on Yom Kippur. That when it says the ampilya is a shoe, that's if it's a leather ampilya. And that's what you say it's not a shoe, it's just a garment that made out of wool or something like that. That's not leather. And Gemara says, otherwise a contradiction of Yom Kippur. Titania, well, yitayu adam bekur de kisin. So we have one brayso that says that you're not to walk around in your home with these small, very thin leather shoes. But you can walk around with the ampillion in your house. So, and it's at first glance it's difficult because the brayso says that you're not allowed to walk. The other brayso says you're not allowed to walk around with the ampillion in your house. We see there's two types of ampilya. One is prohibited to walk around on Yom Kippur because that's a leather one, and the other one is a garment one. That's going to be permitted to walk around on Yom Kippur because according to Rava, there's no concern about tainog on Yom Kippur. No concern about pleasure. It's just a concern of shoes. We'll see more of that on the Daf Yomi for Shabbos, which we'll do later today and on Shabbos.